Good evening, Nakul, and welcome to Design Dialogues hosted by Rethinking the Future in collaboration with Fublis. This is your host, Bhavya, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Nakul, one of the founder and principal architect of Urban Tree Pune. Just to give a brief introduction about the studio, founded in 2011, Urban Tree is an innovative architecture and design firm focusing on addressing urban challenges of modern India. Known for their bold and context driven projects, the firm combines meticulous detail with a deep understanding of spaces to create meaningful and sustainable designs. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nakul.
Thank you for having me, Bhavya.
So, before starting the questions, I would like to inform you that this interview will be published on the website of Fublis. So, sign up on the Fublis website and you'll get the access to watch this interview. So, shall we proceed with the questions?
Sure.
So, first question for the day. Your studio, Urban Tree, aims to address urban challenges through design. Could you share how your design philosophy adapts to the unique challenges faced by modern Indian cities in specific projects?
Certainly. Bhavya, I'm sure you're aware, our Indian cities severely lack public open spaces. So, if you've noticed in the past few decades, our shopping malls have actually become our public spaces, but they're not part of the city really. And so we have this severe lack of public open spaces, and so we need to develop them wherever we can. Given our population densities, they'll always be used. So with that, the other issue that we face is that all our public space designs, the models we've been following in our country are a very generic one. A lot of them are legacy driven, which come from say Europe and other places in the world. But we've never developed anything specifically for India, taking into context India's climate, India's requirements, and India's strengths. For example, in the past few years, India has done a lot in solar power generation, using them over buildings and for generation everywhere. But we've never really tried to see how they can be blended within our urban design or with our urban spaces. And I think that's a solid potential which we've never tapped into. So through a multifaceted approach, we look to create solutions towards our urban design challenges.
Moving on to another question. In reference to your project Ranga Bhavan Chowk, what were some of the key design considerations for integrating the lively landscape elements with the plaza's functional spacing and ensuring that they had both functionality and aesthetic appeal to it?
Right. So, continuing from my previous answer, when I was talking about incorporating solar power and new methods of urban design into our practice, this project, Rang Bhavan Chowk, is a prime example of that. So, what we've tried to do here is, as you asked me a question, combining utility and aesthetics. We wanted to create a very usable kind of public space which could be used throughout the day, right from the morning till the evening. But one of the basic challenges we always face in our cities, especially since this project was in Solapur, is the heat in the during the day. Now, of course, one simple option would have been, create softscape and put trees and all. But those trees, of course, in the short term, they have to be maintained by the city's garden department, which unfortunately did not have a very great track record in Solapur. Right at the beginning of the project, we knew that that was not going to be a very dependable solution that could stand the test of time. And we found here an opportunity to do to have a more experimental idea, something bold, which could combine the utility and aesthetics. So, which is why we created a plaza which was covered with solar panels and LED video panels at top with all at separate angles. So it created a semi-shaded plaza, and so we were able to generate power using these solar panels, which is again powering the electrical requirements of the plaza. They also create shade down below. So we've seen many times events happening there during the day, social and public gatherings happening during the day after the project is completed. So, in that sense, yes, I feel we were able to achieve a blend of utility and aesthetics.
So, following along the same project, could you elaborate on any challenges encountered when incorporating such dynamic landscaping elements you just mentioned in this urban environment, and how were these resolved?
Yeah. So the main challenge was not, we were able to get the physical elements or all the design elements in place without much trouble. The main challenge are the implementation. Being a government project, there are a lot of agencies that have to be coordinated with, and multiple people need to be brought on board, right from the electrical department, plumbing, so on and so forth. And then managing the public, things like that, because that is a major aspect of public projects. So in that, it comes more towards a project management perspective, which also we did for the project. And yeah, we had to be a lot more involved in the project on a regular basis than we are on most other projects. So I would be on site probably every third to fourth day. It's only that way that we were able to achieve the output that we.
Talking about sustainability, how do you approach the integration of sustainability into your design, and how do you balance environmental concerns with the functioning needs of the urban spaces in the current situation of the India right now?
So for us, sustainability is not an add-on feature in our projects. Since we began our practice, and in all our projects are climate responsive. They take into consideration actual clients' needs, not going overboard with material usage, not going overboard with over design, where where you're essentially wasting a lot of material. Um, and of course, the primary aspect in this is climate conscious design, which in which you take cognizance of the exact precise location of the site, what it's surrounded with, looking at the wind direction, where the light comes from during different parts of the day, how you can minimize power consumption in the building for most part of the day. And so these aspects have been part of our practice since day one in all the projects that we do. When it comes to urban spaces, I think the previous project that we just discussed, which was the Rangbhavan Chowk, in that the that particular aspect is fairly obvious, where the solar panels have been used and all. But we need to do a lot more in our urban spaces, as you rightly pointed out, that it has to become part of more and more public spaces and our urban projects. So yeah, it's part of our the basic design process.
So, talking about another interesting project of yours, and which amazes me also, your own Urban Tree Studio. So, what were the main conservation techniques used to maintain the heritage aspects of this colonial era residence, and how did you influence your design choices for creating your own Urban Tree Studio?
So I can't answer this question without explaining how we came to this property. But this is not our own property. We do not own it. During our long search for a good space for our studio, we were very lucky to have just stumbled upon this beautiful heritage bungalow. When we came in, I was completely taken in by the heritage aspect of it, because this is like 93 years old and still in very good condition. When and when we saw it, I knew that whatever we do has to respect the uh, heritage aspect of the project, of the building rather, sorry, and we have to blend within it. Now, for that, unfortunately, what was happening here is that the condition that we found the space in, um, over the past few decades, its materials had been sort of diluted. What I mean by that is the structure had these beautiful timber windows, but they were all painted with oil paint a few decades ago. Beautiful stone flooring had been replaced with these typical vitrified 2 by 2 glossy tiles. All the walls, everything was in a unique color. So we spent about 2.5 months just removing all the oil paint from these beautiful timber windows and doors. And today, after the restoration of these elements, I mean, you can just see the fine quality of timber and the fine quality of the workmanship, because even after 93 years, they are in a great shape. So the first part was the restoration of a lot of these materials. We had to bring in a lot of our own utilities. Since this was a studio, which is essentially the office, you need a lot of electrical components, electrical systems coming in. So we had to have discussions with our friends who are heritage experts. getting their opinions on exactly how to work around a structure like this. And so, yeah, I mean, it was an arduous process, but it was a very fun process.
So, talking about the same project, what which design aspects do you feel best exemplified the concept of blurred boundary between heritage and the contemporary elements of this project?
Yeah, so when in my previous answer, I was talking about how we didn't want to overpower the heritage nature. So what we did was, firstly, when we restored all the materials to their former glory, like for example, you can see this beautiful timber storage unit right behind me, shutters. They were all yellow, so we restored all of them to their original condition. We replaced the glasses, all of that. And when we brought in our own design aspects, I mean, our own design elements, like the furniture or units, whatever we kept them very, very simple, right? Very simple geometries, very simple materials, mostly black and white. And in the center, the central bay in the office, which is now our studio, there is a beautiful arch. So that arch was replicated in a lot of the furniture design that we did here. Like for example, this very desk that I sit on is made up of two arches. We have some consoles which are doing that, as well as some discussion tables. So that became a major part of the design. The second, colors. As I said, it's all black and white. The rafters in the ceiling, which we've kept just the way they were, we've just painted them black again. So within the existing materials, we brought a dash of contemporary design, and so that is where it really we are at that boundary between heritage and culture. So if you were to visit the space, you would know that you're in a heritage building, in the heritage block, but you will find the space to be very contemporary.
So, with reference to your personal architecture journey so far, given your international education and work experience, how has the exposure of European public spaces influenced your design process when working on projects based in India?
In that respect, so during my post graduation studies in London, and even later, I've traveled in Europe to different countries and cities. What has always struck me is the historically as well is their willingness to experiment for their own needs. For example, if you see the King's Cross station in London, and there are many others across Europe, these stations are absolutely massive. They are bold in their design and in the technology, in the structural technology that they have used, which is centuries ago. But at that time, they knew that that was required. So they went all in with very bold approaches for these projects. And whether they did it 300 years ago or they're doing it now, that has always been at the forefront. And I think that is something we can definitely learn in India. I do not mean in terms of what they're designing, we have to design. I am saying in the basic approach of willingness to experiment and to be bold with our projects. We have to try to figure out what is correct, right for us. We don't need to copy what they've done, but we need to figure out what is right for us. For example, that is what we try to do with the Rang Bhavan Chowk project. I doubt there is a urban space like that in India right now. But what we tried to do was that we tried to experiment and to figure out, okay, how can these spaces actually develop in a break from traditional thinking. So this was very important. The second aspect I feel is that they have, I mean, Europe has always people there have always respected their heritage. But while doing so, when they do new buildings, they do not copy their heritage, but they're inspired by it, and yet they build buildings which look new. In contrast, nowadays, what's happening in India is that when you build new buildings, they're looking like old buildings. So they want to make them like forts, airports coming up which look like forts, which I find is quite inappropriate to do. When you're building structures in the 21st century, they have to look like they're structured from the 21st century. I do not mean that they have to be generic and they have to be looking like they're from Europe. I mean that they can be Indian, they have to be looking Indian, but they have to be contemporary in that manner. So we have this great opportunity through these great projects coming up in India now to develop that new contemporary design language for India, for Indian architecture. And I think we should take that. So these are two important lessons that I have learned during my international education and studies, travels.
Talking about another very phenomenal project of yours, that is the resident at the Belgium. What were the primary inspirations behind those architecture and spatial design elements of that residence?
The project you're talking about was a very tight project. So the plot was quite uh, restricted. It was just a 2,600 square feet plot where this young family wanted to build a house. Now, being in Belgaum, which is in Karnataka, anybody who's been there would know that they're very tight. They have very dense urban fabric. There's hardly any setback there. So between two adjacent houses, there'll be a space of just about 6, 7 feet at the most. So we knew that being in that dense fabric, there was no view to be gotten from the outside. So if you look out from the house, there's no real view. So we knew that we had to create views on the inside. Secondly, since as I said, the plot was restrictive in its size, we had to stack spaces above each other. So we had to go vertically. And in doing so, we created, as I said, the views. We started creating, open to sky spaces and other landscape areas at multiple floors. So, for example, the ground floor has a garden. The first floor also has a garden. And when I say garden, it's not like a artificial turf. It's actual soil. So we sunk the slab, we filled in soil, we did the waterproofing, and we actually put lawn there with plantation. So these things happen. Again, when we were stacking up the floors, we made sure that we created courtyards within the house so that allowed a lot of light to pour into the house throughout the day. Another good effect of that also was the cross ventilation of the house. So we installed turbo ventilators at the top, and stack effect comes into play, and that to ventilate the home much better as well. And yeah, so I would say those were the main design thoughts that we brought into the space.
Talking about another project, the bus stand in Pune, how do you envision this bus stand influencing the future of public transportation infrastructure in Pune and potentially inspiring similar projects in other urban areas?
But I think I need to answer that in two ways. Firstly, what we tried to do here was to enhance the experience of the public or the commuter who's using the bus, who's catching a bus from there or getting off there. We wanted to enhance the commuter's experience, make it a lot more aesthetic and comfortable. So what the thought is that if more and more people and more bus stands start to develop well, more and more people will start moving towards mass transit, which is the solution that we need to go for in our country. Going ahead, we can't keep relying on private cars and two wheelers for every single person. We do need to move towards mass transit, and that's the only way we can have any sort of comfort during our journeys here. So the main idea was that we need to make the experience of the commuter much more comfortable and aesthetically pleasing. The second thing was that at the moment, people who most use mass transit or buses or city buses is the common man. And for the common man, aesthetics doesn't doesn't figure high on the list of priorities at all. They have no idea. A typical common man does not have any idea of architectural aesthetics or urban space or urban design or anything like that. So bringing this to the fore also helps educate the public and to raise awareness of what design is and how design can influence and improve the lives of the people.
I think it's one of the vision that you want to share. It's like how design can be a strong, responsible aspect in the society to create about something new.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, moving on to the last question for the day. Looking ahead, how do you envision the future of architecture and urban design in India, particularly in the context of sustainability and technological advancements? And how do you plan to adapt your practice in these changes?
So, when you talk about the future of urban design and all, I think we are in for a very bright future because urban design practice has just started in India, right? Because in the past few years, India is doing well economically, and since India is doing well economically, the country has money to spend on public spaces. So that was not happening earlier, or rather, at the scale that it is happening now, or it's beginning to happen now. Secondly, we have a lot of brilliant young minds coming into the field who are really passionate about urban design and doing good urban design projects. So that is one facet of it. The second is sustainability. Should not be an add-on feature, but it has to be a basic feature of every single project that we do. We should remember not to go overboard with anything. At the same time, we have to be ambitious with our designs. That is the one way that we can take ourselves ahead. When we talk about technology, I'm sure, I mean, everybody's talking about AI right now, and that is going to be the big force that's going to transform architectural and the entire design field. In the studio, it is a regular topic of discussion within the studio as well. I mean, because everybody's wondering how this is going to affect us in the future and how AI can be probably a productive tool for us. So we currently just playing with it, but it is not part of our design process yet. Maybe going into the future as tech evolves more and more, it will become a more inclusive part of our design process. But I think when it comes to technology, I don't think we are the ones who will be driving that. It's the tech industry, and when they do come out with something new, we will adapt to it. But yeah, we are en route.
So that was the last question for the day, Nakul. Thank you so much for giving your precious time. It was a pleasure to have you here, and don't forget to sign up on the Fublis website. Thank you so much, Nakul.